Our guest, Kuja Jenim Boateng, is the technical director of Tex Sites Ghana Limited. They're the guys who produce GTP and Woodin products. Gideon Ajiman is the marketing and business development consultant for very well-known Ghanaian brand Wear Ghana. And then we have Ifya Ejakuma Bunsu, who is the CEO of Ifya Ejakuma, and they make some amazing shoes. I've just seen the pair she's got on this morning, and yeah, they're good. All right, so why is this conversation important? Of course, we've decided here at Joy that we want to push the narrative of promoting made in Ghana products, which is interesting because this morning nobody on our team wore anything made in Ghana to work. Nobody. I mean, we've already confessed our sins on this one. And it's part of why this conversation is important.
Sami has an objection.
Yeah, Sami, he had prior notice because we announced earlier on the show that we didn't that we had all failed to wear made in Ghana.
So he found something to wear.
Yes, at that time he was leaving the house, so he just went back and changed. No, he's exempt. All right, so that's part of the reason why this conversation is important. Okay, we need to understand what's happening in our minds as customers, right? But here are some interesting numbers. In 2020, according to the OEC website, Ghana imported $182 million worth of used clothing. I'm not even talking about the stuff these guys are wearing here. I'm talking about used clothing. We took $182 million of our scarce, foreign exchange and bought used clothing with it and sold it all. About 30, how much of it? Oh, about 72 million of it came from the United Kingdom. $72 million. About $31.9 million, almost $32 million of it came from China. $11.8 million came from Canada. We even imported $10.6 million worth of used clothes from South Korea. And Poland. That's the one that shocked me. I mean, Poland.
I heard you this morning.
$10 million from Poland in 2020. So you can well imagine that these numbers have probably gone up by now. We're in 2022. There is a hunger for foreign-made clothing. Not just the clothing, but the textiles and the shoes, all of it. Now, I did some research. And this is my first question. I'd love to hear all of you on this. I did some research, and I was trying to understand what goes into people's choice of clothing. Because even those who think they don't care what they wear, even they are making a choice when they get dressed in the morning. So what are the big factors that people consider when they are getting dressed? And the number one factor is that they want to fit in. So people want to look like they belong where they are going. They want to look like everyone else there. They want to look like they have, basically they are in the right place and they are the right people to be in the right place. So we dress for identity and for identity. Now, if that's the case, then why is it that most Ghanaians, as the figures prove, most Ghanaians believe that in order to show that they are in the right place, Ghana, they must dress like they are from somewhere else. As people who are catering to this market, and I'll start with Kojo on the phone before I come into the studio. As people who are catering to this market, Kojo, how do you even design a business model when you know that the majority of your target customers think that clothing from elsewhere is better than anything you can produce?
The discussion should start from the idea that over the years, many Ghanaians have looked at it from the angle that locally produced fabrics are not really for formal locations. Okay. So we see fabrics that are printed locally to be used for marriage ceremonies, issues related to funeral, things like that. So when it's very formal. We tend to shy away from these ones, and then we want to go for this Western style or European fabric. That is the first one. But then, aside that, the main reason why people patronize this, and the numbers we really give staggering. 182 million is really, really a lot.
That's crazy.
But then the question is, you ask, is why is it so? I think the three biggest issues that come to mind is cost. It is affordable, I should say, and then it is readily available. It is also in the style that you want. Usually, when you go to this used clothing, when you pick it, you fit it. If it's not okay, you drop it, you pick another one until you get a one that fits fine. That is one aspect of it. The style may be good, that is fine. You don't need thinking in your head what's the style. You don't have any discussion with a seamstress or a tailor, oh, how am I going to put this together and all that. And then not to talk about the fact that a lot of the times you are disappointed. You get it done and it doesn't fit. And then that sort of disappointment makes you run away from this locally made fabric. That's the main thing that comes to my project. But I must say it's shifting. The idea that these fabrics can only be used for traditional occasions or cultural occasions is shifting. We see a lot of people buying these fabrics for even formal wear. Just like you mentioned, people are using it for office wear, for occasions that are requiring very formal activities. Okay, so that's my first submission to this. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And because of what Kojo has said, I think I'm very interested to hear Ifia's take on this, because in your case, I can't say by looking at your shoes that I know I'm looking at a made in Ghana pair of, what are these, sandals, right?
Yeah, sandal heel.
I can't tell just by looking that they are made in Ghana. I would have to look at the label and then I would know.
Yeah.
So when it comes to shoes, it's not always obvious from the outside. Why do people still, because they do, prefer foreign made shoes?
Okay, so I think mostly people have the idea that made in Ghana products are not quality. That's where it starts from. Because people will tell you, oh, it's made in Ghana, it can't be that quality. But we are producing quality styles in Ghana. Like my footwear, we have woven, we have types that are made with our fabrics, like the GTP and then Woodin fabrics. And it clearly states that it's made in Ghana. But still, people would prefer getting foreign shoes or other ones because they feel like once it's made in Ghana, it won't last. But our footwear are very durable. People have had them for years and they are still wearing. So they have to get over the fact that because it's made in Ghana, it's not quality. We are making quality, durable footwear in Ghana.
Why is it so hard to change people's minds on this? Why is it so hard to convince people?
I think we are getting there, but then they have been that way for a long period of time. Most people, that's how they were brought up. They brought up loving foreign things. People brought up not loving their skin, not loving their hair. It's been there for years, for generations. So I think it would take more work and more time and making a lot of noise about it. But it all starts from the beginning. That is our orientation. Made in Ghana products are not quality. Made in Ghana products does not last a long time.
Now, Gideon, your brand is perhaps one of the most recognizable Ghanaian fashion brands. Where Ghana, I mean, it's everywhere. I'll tell you what's the best illustration of it. Ifia is wearing Wear Ghana. Okay, so it's, I mean, everybody has a piece or 10 in their wardrobes. So when it comes to your brand, that question of quality, it seems to have been already answered. But you are still competing with the Pradas and Gucci's and Balenciagas, or even the Zaras and H&M's of this world. Why?
So thank you, Kojo. Let me say the variants are many. Before I even answer your question, let me say, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this, but everything I've got on today, apart from my briefs, was made here in Ghana. So I've got my beats from Luigi and Tema. This is from Urban Grey in Tema as well. These shoes, and if the camera can pick these shoes up, probably the most wonderful shoes I've ever seen, made by a lady in Kaswa called, the shoe is Nuisa, I've forgotten the lady's name. The pants, and that's what I actually want to get to. Everybody knows Wear Ghana. The pants, I made them with a tailor as well as the shirt. Bought the material and then made those. I think that's very significant. So let me even start with this point. When we export our cocoa to Switzerland, and the Swiss make chocolates with that, that's a Swiss product, right? So I think that's one thing we are missing. Thinking about fashion in Ghana with only African prints. For a lot of us, it's only when we do stuff with things that are, let's say, produced here, that we think it's African fashion. So then we limit our market. That's the very first thing I'll say. I think both Ifya and unfortunately I missed his name, the guy on the phone, have already talked about what the seeming problem is with the customer. What I'll say is, I think the most dangerous thing for anybody or any business to think is that anybody owes you patronage. You always have to work for it. And it starts from really understanding what the customer wants. We don't really have a problem. Do people wear outfits? 100%. Then there's no problem. What we need to understand is what people wear and why people wear. And then you need to meet people at their point of need. I don't think we have enough time to really get into all of that. But for me, I'd rather focus on what we in the fashion industry have to do. And the very first thing I'll say is, we need more non-designing and more non-sewing talents in the industry. And let me give you an example. Imagine here in Joy FM, if you only employed presenters, what will happen? You wouldn't have any business. You need your producer. You even need a lady who sits at the front desk. What's happening in the fashion industry is more often than not, you only have people who can sew. And then you have other professionals like marketing, people who understand how to create markets, people who understand finance. And so that's a challenge. The next thing is, and it's quite linked together, the next thing is fashion people need to understand the business of fashion. For example, there's an over focus on, and that's why I actually talked about my pants and shirts, on ceremonial and formal dress in our market. But the thing is, if we're to go into our individual wardrobes, how many formal wear do we have? How many smart casual? How many casual stuff do we have? And then we realized that there's a huge part of the market that we're not catering to. In Wear Ghana, when we started, we also started doing made to measure. And then we came up with the Gigi. And the Gigi took our business to the next level. And even in terms of the business module, just going from made to measure to retail, that's something you can scale. And then you talk about production. For example, if you're using the tailor model, you can't go really far. The people we're up against from all around the world, they're doing assembly line. So people need to really understand the business. People then also need to understand marketing. And I think a lot of people get marketing wrong. They think marketing is all these formulas and theories that are learned in school. Marketing is essentially working with what the market gives you. Seth Godin, who is one of the biggest marketers around the whole world, says that he's paid to notice things. That's what marketing is. Open your eyes, open your ears. What are people saying and what are people doing? That's how you market. And so, and the thing is, if you judge your target customer, why is he wearing this? Then there's no way you can sell to him. It's taking what it is that he or she is giving you. This is what I wear every day. Can you create that as well? The other thing, and I think that's probably the most important point, I think is collaboration. We're working in silos, and that's why I was very happy when I walked in this morning and Ifya was wearing what you call it, our stuff. Like I said, I've got stuff from virtually every designer in Ghana, but that's like the basic level. When I talk about collaboration, for example, and you, Kojo, will know, wherever you've gone around the world, where people take fashion seriously, you'd have like a one-spot marketplace, a place where you walk into and you've got multiple brands, like different shops. We don't have anything like that. Even online, it's the same thing. So collaboration, and when we talk about collaboration here, more often than not, we probably only collaborate when we're doing fashion shows. The thing about fashion show is the most important aspect of a fashion show is the business aspect, where buyers show up from around the world and buy for the big shops. None of that happens on our shows. So our shows are just shows. So when I talk about collaboration, I'm talking about, can't we come together and put up a production unit, it might be too much for any one brand to do that. But if a couple of brands came together and they put together a production unit, what will happen is, and they're actually companies, factories that are set up here, producing for some of these global brands that you talked about. Some of those shirts that come back here that we were actually produced here, produced in Ethiopia and other parts of the continent, and then it goes back to America, and then we buy them. So if we had, let's say, a proper factory, and I don't really want to get into what the government should do, but there's a PSI conversation where industries were set up, and some of them, as far as I'm aware, or when the last time I checked, a lot of those were not being used. These are facilities that designers can come together and use. And once again, when there's there's a gap between what we need to do and then the potential of the factory, then you can outsource that. That's another thing. Then we can create marketplaces. So it's, for me, my focus is always on what can we do. The customer is not the problem. The customer has a taste. We don't always have to do, and the thing I was going to say, we don't always have to do kaftan. The truth is, kaftan is not even African. The word kaftan itself is a Persian word, and it said that the first kaftans were created in Mesopotamia, but it's now an African thing. That's the same way we can rethink what we think of suits, and suit can actually become African. If Africans like suits, and Africans don't want to give up suits, and we can get into that. It's, it comes from religion and education. Into in the past, scratchy, not resident. That has become a thing that stays. I remember when we were out of school, the very first agency I worked for, marketing communications, it was actually in the contract that you couldn't wear African fabric, or you couldn't wear African clothes. So we've got that. But the thing is, if that is what people want to wear, that shouldn't limit us in any way. We should produce what people want to wear. And I'm happy GTP is on the line. From the market, once again, it always comes from what is the market telling you. For a lot of people, if they're buying the Gigi to send to the office, then they want African print that isn't as colorful as the ordinary one. And that's insight coming from the market. So people want things that are toned down. But if I want to, like you rightfully said, it's been proven with different experiments that human beings want to fit in. There are very few people like myself who can carry this on my head, who like to stand up. But the ordinary person wants to fit in. Fitting in means people don't want that much color on them, especially when they're going to the office. So like I said, the main thing is working with insights. For example, and I know GTP has created sub-brands, and we only use GTP. We're probably, when you take the wholesalers, wouldn't match it, but we're one of their biggest customers, and we would always use GTP. But I think it's, so GTP has created Woodin, and what's the other one? I've forgotten another one. And then you can buy smaller pieces of that. But there are people who would want to buy, let's say, a yard of GTP. And that should be something GTP is looking at, because in the past, once again, we're changing and usage has changed. In the past, where more often than not, people would wear GTP, a fratamno, so then there's 6 pieces. Now somebody wants just a piece of GTP to do something. And I think so we're in 2023, the market always changes, especially social media has made everything so fast-paced that if you're working with what you knew in the past, then you're absolutely getting everything wrong.
All of you on the show today are producers. There is an aspect of your business that involves production.
Yes.
And that's a good thing for me, because I'm interested in the cost factor here. Taking your advice, Gideon, that we must pay attention to the customer. Customer wants this, so we want to meet them at their point of need and give them what they want. I want to start with you, Kojo. How does cost factor in when you are trying to meet the needs of a customer base like Ghana, where our tastes are, like we've already established, so foreign? What does it cost you to produce clothing and fabric and textiles that the Ghanaian customer can buy and still feel that identity of belonging? How much does it cost to produce successfully? Do we still have Kojo on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. So the crux of the matter is to do with the cost. Now, the cost of production determines everything that we're talking about here. So if indeed we want to meet the customer and do exactly what the customer needs, we need to look at cost. At this moment, our costs are way out of the range that we're talking about to come to the people who are buying these clothes that are, I'll say, like hand clothing and all that. If we look at the the chain, we at this moment buy cotton all the way from Burkina Faso. We don't have cotton in Ghana now. The ginnery in the north is not working. So we get a cotton and then we give to Waterstar in Gabon at this moment. And then they convert it into fabric that we can print on. Now the dyes that go into it, the chemicals that go into it are all imported. So by the time you run the whole chain, you realize that the cost is way too much for the average Ghanaian, you see. So we're talking about even utilities that go into it. Electricity is already been announced by the PURC that the electricity is going to go up by 29.96% for the industry, 8.3% for water. That is the percentage that is going to go up. Now that you come to think of it and you say, okay, do we then slap all this cost to the consumer or the customer? And that is the crux of the whole issue. Collaboration, it's very fantastic. I hear, and I'm glad he's using a lot of GTP. And that is the way to go. If we get the fabric, and then the next line is to look at how we get into bespoke designs and ideas for customers. That'll be very, very good.
Yeah.
So I think that is a way to go about it.
That's it.
Over the years, we've modeled our business to make sure that we meet customers. We talked about the fact that, indeed, he talked about the fact that if we were buying fabric in the past, GTP, you have to buy 12 yards, 10 yards, because we're wearing it in the traditional way. But we looked at it and realized that a lot of the youth would want to have 2 yards over jeans or something. So we decided to look at getting packages into smaller quantities so that people can afford. So New Star came in. We've also launched Ohima in smaller quantities, and then the Adipa Premium and Woodin, for which we have shops all over, dotted all over the country, already sewn into shirts. So you walk in and then you just pay, and then that is it. But I must say, even with this, it's still not affordable. A shirt will cost more than 200 Ghana cedis. So then are you still competing with somebody who wants to get something from the street, pick one to wear and go wherever he wants to go? So Kojo, that is where we are.
It makes sense. I get what you're saying. Cost is the main thing, right? Cost is everything. Now, if you just joined us, we're talking about the local fabric, textile, fashion industry. Why it seems that Ghanaian tastes run so foreign. It's part of our Made in Ghana series. Our guests, Kojo Ajenim Boateng from Tex Styles, Gideon Ajiman from, Tex Sites, not Styles, Gideon Ajiman from Where Ghana, and Ifya Ejakuma Bosu from Ifya Ejakuma. All right, listen. This thing, it beggars belief. It baffles me. If really the number one consideration in getting dressed is identity, then why does the Ghanaian not prefer to look like a Ghanaian when it comes to their clothing? Well, we're trying to understand it. And of course, Gideon says, pay attention. What's the customer telling you? Customer says, I want this. So how do you meet them at that point of need? And how do you afford to do so? I just asked Ifya during the break how much her shoes cost. She said 400 cedis. Now, I would pay 400 cedis for these. But I can also think of a number of people who would rather do this. They would rather somebody takes a pair of H&M sandals, puts them in a bale, puts them on a ship, sails the ship for weeks, burns fuel during that voyage to Accra, pays import duty to remove the bale from the ship, transport it on our pothole-covered motorway all the way to Tema Station, arrange it on the road and scream at the top of his lungs for people to come and buy, and then go and pick up those same H&M sandals for what, 120 Ghana cedis. So I guess the question I would love to hear your answer to is this: why is it cheaper for someone to produce something in another country at what your customer thinks is better quality, ship it all the way here, paid duty to get it to the customer, and it still costs less than what you have made right here in Ghana in one place and move to your shop to sell.
Okay, so it starts from the material. Cost of material is extremely high. Just ending of last year, we had to reevaluate our prices and reprice because the prices of material were extremely high, and we just had to do that. So let me take a bag slippers that I make. You'd have to buy the bag cork, buy the boner, and then do the weaving, have it all fixed. By the time you're done, the price is way past the one they'll go and buy before you add the packaging and everything. So it all comes to the prices of the materials that we use. They are high, and then you'd have to pay workers too. So putting all of that together.
So what's the solution then? I mean, because you're always going to have to use materials.
So the
to make
solution
these
is,
shoes.
I think, so if we had, mine for instance is completely handmade from scratch. So the H&M, the Gucci's, most of them are made with machines. They just like put 1,000 pairs together within the shortest time, but everything is handmade from scratch. So you'd have to spend hours making the woven parts and then have it fixed. So definitely handmade things would be higher than those made with leather. But if we had more people on the weaving, if we had machines that we could use to make the work faster, if, let's say, some of the leathers were produced here in Ghana, because the leathers are exported, so they will pay duties the same way they would do with the photos that they are bringing in. So all the materials that we are using, in my opinion, can be made here in Ghana, because we can make leathers here. We can make the foam balls that we make here. We can make the bonnets. I mean, all the things that we are using, all of them can be made here in Ghana, and then we will use them to make our products. By doing so, the prices will definitely drop. But here's the case, every other thing is exported, from the cord that we use, the leather, everything. So in my opinion, if things are made here in Ghana, it would help bring the prices down.
So I suppose your suggestion here is that the whole industry needs to expand, the value chain needs to expand. People need to come in at different levels to produce different things that will make your cost cheaper, because you don't have to spend so much to import some of the things that you need to make your shoes. That's interesting. Just before I bring in Gideon, the branding question then comes in, because I was listening to you describe the process by which you make your shoes, and the more I heard, the more attractive your shoes sounded. They are handmade. Someone sits down and takes their time to make it by hand, as opposed to the Gucci that was made in a factory. So the more I heard it, the more it sounded like I would rather have shoes like yours. How well do businesses harness that idea that what you are making is Rolls-Royce compared to somebody's Toyota? How well do you harness that in your marketing?
To start with, my business started solely on social media, so I share a lot of videos of behind the scenes, doing the weaving, how the whole thing is done. Initially, people didn't really understand what went to, but now I think they do, because customers don't complain about the prices. Those who've bought from me before knows that they are buying quality, so it's not even a question anymore. But I share more videos. I make sure I carry my customers and people who follow my brand along the process, so they get to understand what they are spending their money on.
The quality question, it never goes away. I mean, you have such a big operation at Wear Ghana, so you've nailed it. But you still sometimes have to go to someone to make you a pair of pants or a shirt. Exactly. And that is where the question of quality comes up. Sometimes it's not even the finishing. Sometimes it's just the customer service. Come for your trousers on Friday. And he actually means Friday in December. You know, so...
We heard Charlemagne the God talk about service in Ghana in general.
And that was embarrassing. That was embarrassing, but he's telling the truth. How is that contributing to this difficulty in tipping the balance from foreign-made goods to local?
Oh, it is. So, for example, when I mentioned the fact that for a fashion show, you don't have buyers coming in, there was actually a conversation that happened, and the studio didn't look this way then. I think Nia Tego was the one who was hosting the show. The show that happened, George Quayle hosts now on Saturday.
Yes.
And it was a fashion conversation, and I think it was Claudia Lumo talking about why the buyers I think she had brought some buyers to some fashion shows, and they hadn't made any purchases because of quality. Yes, so finishing is a major issue. The things we get away with here, and let me reference the Elikem Sarkodie thing on social media, where Elikem took a picture of Sarkodie from, I think that must have been behind the scenes for Countryside with, what's his name? With Black Sharif, and said the buttons, there was an issue with the buttons. Yes, so I think it's generally, and it's not just the fashion industry, it's we have an excellence issue where we don't think anything has to be done 100%, and that's a challenge. Like if it's good enough, then it's good enough to go. But where in other places, no, it has to be 100%. But that's an issue that machinery can easily solve. So then it comes back to a couple of things, which is, like I'm saying, is number one, the size of the market. Admittedly, when you talk about why things are produced there and they're still much cheaper after everything it goes through to get here, it's an issue of economy of scale. They have a bigger market that they are what you call it, producing for. So that's why for me, one of the solutions is fashion brands coming together. For example, if we're to pick a Fias product, this shoe is also made by another lady. There are a couple, there's Horseman, there's so many people making leather products. Imagine if they were to come together to do their sourcing together. Because the thing is, everybody's buying from the open market. And when you buy from the open market, the prices would never make sense. Yeah. So and this is just me shooting off the cuff, imagine all the leather producers were coming together and they were buying direct from source. That immediately brings down the cost. The other thing is, and you rightfully nailed it, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about, storytelling, and that's what marketing comes down to. For example, Apple don't make the best phones, and people will beat me if I say this in the open. Apple don't make the best phones. But what Apple has done is told the story of making fantastic phones over time. And there's the iconic 1989 ad that Apple produced, which eventually contributed to Steve Jobs being kicked out. Because that was an advert where there was no product mention or placement. And even his board didn't understand. But Apple has nailed down their communication. Let me give you a more obvious example. So an experiment was done. 10 painters were asked to paint stuff, and they put the things online to sell. And then prices came in from the public, so people could pitch. People said how much they're willing to pay for those. Then they gave each painting to a poet, and then poets put stories behind each of the paintings. They put those same paintings now with the stories back online, and the prices were significantly higher. Storytelling. So when you do your storytelling well and you do your branding well, so effective branding makes the value of the whole brand much more than the sum of the different parts. And so, for example, and we can go into different examples, but you can say, oh, but this thing is not really all that, but it's that whole story that has been told over and over and over in different ways. And the thing is, I remember I was on a call with somebody in America who is also in fashion, and then he mentioned the fact that, and it's true, if you're doing everything handmade, that is a luxury. That a lot of the things we produce, it's luxury, and luxury is sold entirely different from how you sell mass market products. It has, you need to put some style behind the selling as well, and I think that's one of the things that we're struggling with. The other thing I was saying, and I always recommend this book to anybody who's in the art space. It's a book called The Turning of America: How Hip Hop Created a Culture that then rewrote the rules of the new economy. It's written by Steve Stout, who built Jay-Z's brand. When you read that book, you'll understand why he says hip hop turned America. But then more importantly, you notice that Afrobeat is now turning the whole world. Now every art form has the opportunity to jump on the back of Afrobeat. There are two issues that when you look at most of the established genres around the world, rock, you can tell a rock artist and a rock fan from a distance. Same with reggae, they probably will look like me. Country music. But when it comes to Afrobeat, even though in the audience you see the Afrobeat look, on stage it's not there. The boys are dressing like Kanye West and all of that. That's one issue. The other thing is, the more Afrobeat becomes popular and interventions like December in Ghana grow, and people begin to fall in love with Ghana a bit more, it presents a challenge. Because I can tell you that whilst we're having this conversation, there are people sitting out there in the West and saying, how do we get into the African space, not by selling faux and knockoffs, but by producing the things we're producing here. And so we actually don't have the luxury of time. Like this conversation we're having, when we sit to have the same conversation 10 years from now, and we as an industry haven't done the things we're supposed to do. And I think the first, like I said when we started, we need to get out of the victim mentality, that we're not victims. And if we don't do what we're supposed to do 10 years from now, the challenge wouldn't be that Kantamanto is whipping our backs and knockoff is kicking our butts, but it will be that even the African-made clothes are now owned by foreign players.
Like, it's already begun.
Yes.
China is producing kente.
China.
They're already doing that.
Yeah, and that's another thing.
So it's, for me, solutions. It's number one, we need to get our marketing right. And the marketing starts from really working with the insights. You can't dictate to somebody what he or she should buy with his or her money. So working with the insights. The second thing is collaboration. That if we're all to come together, we have one marketplace. For example, what prevents us from having an African fashion village during December in Ghana? Because, for example, when people come now, they know to go to Makola to buy the fabrics by themselves. Which shop can they walk into to buy multiple made products? There's none. There are a couple of concept shops, I think 2 in Osu. But I'm talking about like Savile Row, where you walk in and there's this brand and the Star brand and the Staff brand. None of that is existing here. Again, when we come together and we're producing together, immediately we're sourcing together, the fabric becomes cheaper for us, production costs are all down, and then we can also, on top of that, we create the marketplace physically and online. Like, for example, there's Africrea, which I think is the only online platform that we have in Africa. But there's opportunity for us to create one platform where you can go online as well. The other thing is trading within the borders of Africa. There's this AfTA. I don't even know who came up with the acronym, because it's very difficult to mention. And the implementation is just going just about the same. But the thing is, we need to make, and we have actually been trying for a while, and that's where Ghana to crack it. And I can tell you it's not easy, but to trade across Africa, because that's your natural market. The other thing, and for GTP, same thing that like I'm saying, Afrobeats is happening, that there are people, and I actually took a shot, I've forgotten what show it was in America. There were 2 ladies in African print, jackets. And I looked at the comments on YouTube, and people were blown, because it's like, in that space where they were probably the only African print stuff, it actually looked like they had jewelry on. That's how good it looked. So GTP should also now be looking at maybe a bit of the foreign market. And like I'm saying, it's Afrobeats. Everything else can ride on the back of Afrobeats. Afrobeats is almost #1 in Jamaica now. So why isn't GTP there?
Yeah.
And it's like I'm saying, if you read the book, The Turning of America, then you understand how culture works. That once the music is moving, that everything else can move on the back. So once again, we're not just looking at the African market, but say people are coming down in December in their numbers. Do you think they don't want to wear outfits? They want to wear outfits.
Exactly.
So
But
I
if they
think,
come and we are wearing their outfits.
well, and somebody, but it's not just the outfit. I remember a comment, somebody saying that they came from America to eat waffles here. So it's, once again, it's just we talk a bit too much and complain instead of seeing things as opportunity, because why are we not setting up to sell Ghanaian food in the right places when they come down?
Yeah, this is how I want to wrap things up, and it's the issue of regulation. The regulation's contribution in any industry, the biggest contribution is quality. So I'll start with Kojo, if you don't mind. Something about what our 2 panelists said in the studio, having to make things by hand to a certain standard, and Ghanaians having to change their mentality that made in Ghana clothing or shoes are not of the highest quality, when in fact they are. So, Kojo, my question is this. When it comes to regulation, standardization, how much of it, because if I go to the US right now, the reason why I know that the Gucci bag I buy from Texas will be the same quality and standard as the Gucci bag I buy from New York is because it's not up to Gucci. If Gucci wants to put a product on the market, they have to meet a certain standard. If they don't meet it, they can't put the product on the market. They don't decide. Someone else imposes that standard on them. So my question is this. Who is imposing a standard on the Ghanaian market? Does the Ghana Standard Authority come in and tell you to what standard your GTP fabric should be dyed and woven? Is it self-regulation, or is there a standard to which all Ghanaian manufacturers can work?
You can hear me?
Oh yes, we can.
Good. So for the print industry in Ghana, yes, it is regulated by the Ghana Standard Authority. So that is there. I think the challenge we have, and let me throw in some numbers here. We did some exercise 5 years ago, and we realized that the total amount of fabrics consumed in Ghana is 100 million yards.
Per year?
100 million yards. Now, the 3 factories that are printing, if you take GTP, you take ATL, you take Printex. GTP, for instance, our installed capacity is 24 million yards. If you put all these 3 together, we are in the neighborhood of 60 million yards. 40 million yards is imported. Now, the 40 million, out of the 40 million yards, 80% of this are smuggled and copied. So that is where the challenge is. For a lot of our products on the market at this moment, you have them all smuggled. We have porous borders all over. We've talked about it. Government is coming in with the tax stamp, which has been launched now. What it means is that for every fabric that is produced in the country, you need to affix this tax stamp. Now, the Standards Authority also takes samples at random to check whether you are meeting the standards that is going to the market. In the industry, you could get it printed with a lot of banned substances, carcinogenic, dyes, and all that. So the Ghana Standards Authority are really up and doing in that regard. But the problem is to do with the ones that are smuggled in, that are not going through the official channels. They are not paying the duties, though the levy, everything is not paid. So when I get a fabric new style at 6 yards for 200 Ghana cedis, there's one coming from the Far East that is selling at 100 or 80 Ghana cedis for the same yardage. So then it becomes a big challenge in that regard. So that is the area that I think technology in terms of affixing the tax stamp, using QR codes to authenticate the fabric and all that will come to bear in the coming period. The fear of the industry is that, okay, it is fine, we'll be affixing these stamps, but will the tax force from government really go to the market to confiscate the ones that are copied? Now, the copies I'm talking about is not only coming in and then they've printed made in Ghana on the service, they've put my label on, same design. I spent money developing these designs. So these are the aspects that I think we need to look at.
Indeed.
But on the side of Gideon, we talked about finishing the quality. I think what we're also doing is collaborating with the Association of Seamstresses and Tailors in Ghana. That is one area that we think we can help them up their game in terms of the finishing. The fabric itself, I think we can patch. It's good. It's very authentic. If you buy from genuine places that we've identified or branded areas that you see all over. But more importantly is after the fabric is bought, how it is presented to the consumer. You see pictures that are not well done, buttons that are even already coming off before it's worn, the fabric is worn. So these are the areas that we think the collaboration Gideon talked about comes in very much. So that is it. Okay.
Now, you've talked about how your shoes last for years. The quality is obviously proven by that. But again, I think it's the same question I want to hear both of you on as well. Is it some self-regulation, or has the Ghana Standard Authority come to you and said you should have this tensile strength of leather, and you should use this thread count of cotton? How are you achieving this quality? Is someone making you produce to a standard?
Nobody. It's just me. So personally, I like things that are quality. When I buy shoes, I just tend to check if there's leather, the glue all around it and all of that. So that's what I do with my shoes. It's just like me going out to shop. So I produce for my customers the things that I would like to buy. So after every pair is done, we would have to check it, make sure we cut all the threads out, clean the glues, tighten all the loose ends before we package and send to the customers. But nobody apart from us.
I suppose that identifies the problem in one sentence, because you are doing it based on your idea of quality. So every other producer of shoes will be producing based on their idea of quality. So if you are producing to a high standard and the 99% of the other producers are not, then the customer is still right when he says that Ghanaian shoes are not being produced to high quality.
Yeah. So I think measures should be put in place. People should check. They should have like a whole group of people that are checking, like, this has to be done. Your shoe has to come to this standard. This setting of this quality of leather should be used. This quality, like, our material should be stated. You have to use this. You have to source for this and make the materials available. Because honestly, getting authentic leather is not easy. Because all the ones that they have on the market are synthetic. Sometimes you'd go to buy. I've done this for years, so I would know which one is better. So imagine somebody starting. Those selling would just push it to you that this one is good. But it takes time to actually know the difference between which material is better, which one does. And even sometimes, this is how I started. If I'm bringing a new product, I would have to make it and wear for a couple of days to see how it will last, to see how good the leather is. So imagine I'm making like 20 designs. Do I have to wear each and every one of them before I know how quality the materials are? So yeah, measures should be put in place, and they should make sure we have access to good materials that would produce footwear that would last a long time.
How does this feed into your globalization concept? This idea that we should be selling our fashion to the world, right? Because if I buy a bottle of champagne, the only reason why they can put that word champagne on it is because it has met certain standards and come from a certain place.
Right, yeah.
So how does this feed in? What is the opportunity or the gap that we can be filling as a nation by using standardization to produce something which, if you go and look on whose website was it that I looked? I think it was Neiman Marcus. I went to look on their website and they had Ahinema and selling them for $2,000 or whatever. And I was thinking those were probably made in a Chinese factory, right? But there should be something that would ensure that before you can sell that thing and call it Ahinema, it was made in a certain place by certain people to a certain standard, which can be tested and proven, so that someone from Guangzhou cannot put Ahinema on Neiman Marcus and appropriate our culture to their benefit.
So it's really two issues. So there's the IP issue, intellectual property issue. I'm not too sure whether IP can really restrict use of that. There are things, for example, I think even the Ghana Must Go Back design and Edinkra symbols and stuff. I'm not sure whether they can say you can't do Ahinma, because once again, and when you try copyright or patenting in fashion, then you realize that a little tweak here and there means it's an entirely different product and you don't have any claim to that. So that's the first thing. The
So
second
how do
thing,
people do that with champagne and
so
other things?
it's quite industry specific. Like every industry, the things that you can patent and things that you can't. That's what I'm saying. For example, if I do, and we found out when we tried to patent a design, and then you learn what you can and what you can't, because there's also the issue of fair usage and all of that. Like I'm saying, the IP issue is quite different from the issue of quality. Once again, being quite a peculiar industry, that the issue of standardization and even authorities insisting on certain standards, I think it becomes a bit more difficult because you have to allow for artistic license. And so, for example, Kanye West has made billions selling tattered clothes, which is really clothes that hasn't been done well, if you were to look at it in one light. So if I were doing shoes and I decided that for me, I want my shoes to stand up by putting the glue around the shoe where it's visible, and the customer wants that, I don't think the authorities can say don't do that. So I think ultimately for fashion, it's the customer that's the regulation. And for me, I don't like to put brands on the spot, but for example, we know Primark. You go there and you buy stuff, a lot of the t-shirts you wear once you wash, you probably can't wear it again. But that's a market that you'd say they've got everything right, but it's ultimately the customer makes a decision. And that decision is what we as players also need to look out for. Like I tell everybody, the number one endorsement you're looking for is always repeat purchase. If somebody buys your product once and doesn't come back, irrespective of what he or she told you, there was a problem somewhere, which could be, let's say, a price and I can't afford, but more often than not, it's your product didn't work for me. And that's, once again, comes back to my point where we're supposed to work with what the market is telling us. And some of the things the market tells us with all form of communication is the things they don't say, which is they don't come back to you. They're telling you something. So I'd say it's branding and marketing. Once again, even when we talk about cost, why do people choose to buy something that's expensive? And it's not always an issue that not always down to the fact that I have a lot of money, but it's the way the thing has been. It's now become a status symbol. Like there's this guy on Facebook he sells land, and he's always talking about how people are renting and they're buying an iPhone for 20,000 cedis. But people will buy because it becomes a status thing. And there is that opportunity for everybody to build their brand to become a status thing. That's the marketing part of it. The other thing is the collaboration. If we all come together and we're working together, we're producing together, we're assessing markets together, we're creating markets together, we'll realize that the economies of scale will now work in our favor. Prices will come down, and then we can then sell to a larger market.
That is a point which I hope, if nothing is taken out of this conversation, at least we start to explore the concept of working together to bring down cost. Listen, I wish we could continue this conversation all day because I certainly have a million other questions I would like to put to you. But thankfully, this is only the beginning of a process, and I would love for you guys to be part of the continuing, let's call it campaign, to ensure that our products are consumed by our people.
Could probably the last thing I'd say is, and I'll put you on the spot as a media house, that the media has a role to play as well. When we talk about storytelling and marketing and branding, like you rightfully said at the very beginning, if consistently you're sitting on air and you're wearing foreign stuff, you're also influencing people. But for me, once again, I wouldn't say don't wear it because you have the opportunity to wear it. I'd say content. Where is the content that's promoting our local stuff? And that's the last part of storytelling. That stories have to be platformed, and we can create content that platforms made in Ghana stuff. And so it wouldn't have to be that all throughout the day everybody's wearing made in Ghana, but then you have that show that's dedicated and telling the stories. For example, our fabric, I don't even know what I'm wearing, but this is a story. The pattern is a story. Is it being told? No, it's not being told. And we're in the age of content. And so we can easily fix a lot of these things we're talking about with dedicated content.
There you go. It's good to know that we can play an even bigger role than what we're already playing. And it's good to know we can be a part of the solution. So thanks for that.